By the late 1800s, nearly all of Southeast Asia had fallen under European control. Britain ruled Burma and Malaya. France dominated Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. The Dutch controlled the islands of modern Indonesia. Across the region, ancient kingdoms disappeared beneath foreign flags. But in the center of it all, one nation survived. Siam, the country we now call Thailand. To modernize, this survival can seem almost impossible. European empires possessed industrial armies, modern navies, and enormous global wealth. Entire civilizations had already been conquered across Asia and Africa. By all logic, Siam should have suffered the same fate. Yet somehow it endured. Not through overwhelming military power, not through isolation, but through one of the most remarkable acts of diplomacy and modernization in Asian history. During the 19th century, European powers were expanding aggressively across Asia. Colonies meant resources, trade routes, prestige, and military dominance. Every major empire feared being left behind in the race for territory, and Siam stood directly between two of the world's most dangerous colonial powers. The British Empire advanced eastward from Burma and southward through Malaya. Meanwhile, France expanded westward from Indochina, tightening its grip over Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. Siam found itself trapped between empires. Its leaders understood the danger immediately. If the kingdom remained weak, divided, or isolated, it could easily become the next colony. It was during this growing crisis that King Mongkut, known as Rama IV, began reshaping Siam's relationship with the outside world. Unlike many rulers of the era, Mongkut understood that Europe could not simply be ignored. He studied Western science, geography, astronomy, and languages. Rather than closing Siam off from foreign influence, he opened diplomatic relations with Western nations and negotiated carefully with European powers. Mongkut realized something critical. Siam could not resist the modern world by pretending it did not exist. Ironically, many people outside Thailand unknowingly recognize Rama IV through the famous story that inspired the film, The King and I. While the film itself takes enormous historical liberties, it helped introduce the image of Siam's royal court to Western audiences. But the real story was far more important than fiction, because the survival of Siam would ultimately depend on Mongkut's son, King Chulalongkorn, Rama V. When Chulalongkorn came to power, the pressure surrounding Siam had become even more dangerous. European empires were consuming territory across the region at an alarming pace, and many feared Siam's independence would soon disappear entirely. Rama V understood that survival required transformation. Over the next decades, he launched sweeping reforms that reshaped the kingdom. The government was modernized. The military was reorganized. Railways and infrastructure expanded across the country. Western-style ministries and administrative systems were introduced. Education was reformed. Slavery and corvée labor were gradually abolished. Step by step, Siam presented itself not as a vulnerable ancient kingdom, but as a modern state worthy of international recognition. This was not imitation for its own sake. It was strategy. European powers often justified colonization by portraying foreign nations as uncivilized or incapable of governing themselves. By rapidly modernizing, Siam removed many of the excuses imperial powers used to justify conquest elsewhere. But modernization alone could not fully protect the kingdom. There was another reality Rama V understood clearly. Siam could not defeat Britain or France in open war. And so the kingdom made painful sacrifices to preserve its independence. Territories on the edges of the kingdom were gradually surrendered under diplomatic pressure. Lands that now form much of Laos were ceded to France. Other territories were lost to British influence in Malaya. To many Siamese, these concessions were humiliating. But they may also have saved the nation itself. Rather than becoming fully colonized, Siam evolved into something unique, a buffer state separating the British and French empires. Neither colonial power wanted the other to dominate the kingdom completely, and Siam skillfully used this rivalry to survive between them. Diplomacy became as important as armies, adaptation became as important as tradition, and against extraordinary odds, Siam endured. Today, Thailand remains the only country in Southeast Asia never formally colonized by a European power. That legacy still shapes the nation in ways many visitors never realize. It can be seen in Thailand's monarchy, in its institutions, in its culture, even in its calendar, where the country officially measures time through the Buddhist era rather than the Western Gregorian system. Modern Thailand emerged from an age when much of the world was being divided by empire. And somehow, in the center of that storm, Siam remained its own kingdom. If you enjoyed this story and want more fascinating history and forgotten stories from around the world, subscribe to Beyond the Map, because history gets a lot stranger the further beyond the map you go.